We are a little bit early because we're packed with a schedule. I'm going to just wait a few minutes. How many people are in the line to come in? We're clear. Okay, so you can usher people in and try to fill them in the back. There are some seats here that are in the front, but they're if they come in, just try them to be as least disruptive as possible. I thought this would be an opportunity to thank all of you for coming and the media. This is the 25th anniversary of the National Press Club event that launched the global movement, which has now resulted this morning in the first tranche of information being released by the president and Secretary Hegstead. So what I would like to suggest is that everything released today is much less important than what's in our archive. So, if you go to dpiarchive.com, we'll put a card up in a minute, you'll see we have about 1,000 times more information than that. I will also say that the 2001 National Press Club event had much more information in it than all the congressional hearings that have happened in the last couple of years, significantly more. With significantly more important whistleblowers. So I'd like to thank all of you for coming and thank my assistant Raven for setting this up. Our whole project is me and my wife and one full-time staff member, and all these people, other people you see are volunteers. So let's thank them for their. We don't have Mr. Hegsted's budget of $1.5 trillion. No, we don't. So I wish we did. At least 0.001% of it, this would be solved a long time ago. But it is very touching. You know, this 25 years ago, you're going to see a little video clip summary of that 2-hour event where there were 20 top secret guys disclosing things. And in reality, Disclosure Project began on December 13th, 1993. Remember that date. And that's when I was asked to brief the director of the CIA for Bill Clinton. And Mr. Clinton had made inquiries into this matter and had been denied access, which is what happened to Mr. Obama. When you see this clip where he says, yeah, they exist, but I never got to get to the bottom of it. That's what happened, you know, because we had briefed him, but through official channels, he got nothing. And he is not lying about that. People think he's lying. He is not. So when I had this happen as a young emergency trauma doctor with 4 little kids, I realized, my God, there is a criminal, unconstitutional program keeping all of this secret. And of course, by then I had figured out why. Because if this information comes out honestly and fully, we'll start a new civilization with no need for the Straits of Hormuz. No oil, no coal, no nuclear power. And within 20 years, no poverty on the planet. However, it also is going to be a $1,000 trillion to $2,000 trillion asset removal if you add all those assets up. So we're going to talk about, frankly, what needs to happen towards the end of how this is going to come out and the transition our civilization must go through in the next couple of years if we're going to make it through to the next 1,000. And that is how consequential disclosure is. So before any further ado, I'd like to introduce our courageous people. I have to say that these men who are here are the heroes. I've just been the facilitator of this for 35 years. And to my left is Michael Herrera, Marine, former Marine. And to his left, Jaime Maussan, who's a renowned researcher from Mexico. And he is the only man on Earth that has retrieved a non-human extraterrestrial device and kept it secure from SWAT teams getting it. And that's what we're researching. He did it. Here we have Roderick Castle, also a former Marine, with an amazing story he will share with you. And then we have two of our best, the Green Beret Special Forces, Randy Anderson and Mike Batista. Oh, and I'm Dr. Stephen Greer. Anyway, so, and this is President Trump's full unredacted briefing document given to him and his administration November of 2024. This. It's unredacted. Now, I will tell you that that information and the summary, I was told I had to do a one-sheet summary for the president, and it included the executive orders you're about to see today. It has resulted in where we are now with the first tranche, and thank you, Mr. President, for fulfilling your promise on that, even though it's not much in that file yet. We're told it's just the beginning. But that's why we want to keep the pressure on. Now, I have to say the timing of this is weird. You know, we planned this months ago and announced this date, and my phone blew up yesterday that the White House was going to dump all this material this morning. So for the media, it's not a coincidence that happened, because there are people close in the administration that we've been ferrying this information to, including the Secretary of Defense and the Vice President, Director of National Intelligence, and folks like that. I also want to thank the members of Congress who have stepped up to the plate, Ms. Luna and Mr. Burleson, Mr. Burchett, and many others, people in the Senate Intelligence Committee that I provided information to, and the SCIF at the Senate Intelligence Committee. There are many, many fine people who are trying to get to the bottom of this. The problem is, and this I want to be clear about, there are two governments. There's the government you know about, we elect and appoint. There's a shadow or secret government that is actually running this. And that is not a conspiracy theory. It's a fact. We can prove it. And what that means is, routinely, presidents, SecDefs, and others, they will get the most superficial information on this, whereas the code word level special access projects, top secret special compartment information, is something they never can penetrate, because it's operating outside the constitutional chain of command. I cannot say that more clearly. And that was the conclusion we reached in 1993. Not because I was Googling conspiracy theories, but because I met and briefed the director of the CIA, who told me point blank that he and the president were denied access. Okay, this is a serious problem for our country and for the world. So when the most important issue in the history of the human species comes up, and you have the rule of law completely subverted by an unelected, unsanctioned group, we can have our phones off. Then I think this is a real problem for us as a people. So I think that my biggest problem in the 35 years that I've been doing this is to get people to understand, who are in high office, that you're not going to get access unless you go do a workaround. And so what I've been trying to do is to be a bridge between, right now, over 760 top secret whistleblowers from every agency, Department of Defense, corporations, get their information to people in government, here and abroad, and particularly to people in national security and intelligence circles who want to know this information but are denied access. That is the primary purpose of why I left my medical career, to do it, because I realized they didn't have access, and it was a mistake that people were making to think they did. Now, this is something I would have not have known if I had not taken many, many meetings with key people in the Pentagon. We're talking admirals, generals, senior cabinet level people, ministers of defense elsewhere. And in every single case, sometimes in tears, they would say, we have no access to these programs, but we know they're going on. Now, this is a problem that has to get rectified if we're going to go forward as any kind of democracy. I mean, otherwise it makes a mockery of the rule of law. Okay, so that's the biggest problem, that people haven't wrapped in their minds around that. So what I would want to do, if I were the president, would to send out a special team of folks, this is happening, who do penetrate these covert programs based on the intelligence we have provided. And that is happening. So what you're going to see coming out from the White House and the Secretary of War and others is the tip of an iceberg that they now know is true. And it's probably a trial balloon, and it's probably testing of the waters and the markets and the public. But there's a lot more that they already have. You know what it is? But I'm not going to betray any confidences on that. I'll simply say that they're in the right direction and they have acquired material, let's say physical material and proof. And it's a lot more than lights in the skies that they released today, much more. Now, what I'm here to do today, which I didn't know I was going to be doing this after the fact, we were going to do this kind of preemptively, as we were talking about at dinner last night with the whistleblowers, is to sort of lay down a marker what the standard is that has to come out. Okay, the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God, right? That's what has to come out. So that's what we're working on, and it is going forward. And I would just say, those of you who have seen the materials, how many people have seen what was released today? Probably everybody here. It's all over the news. It is a infinitesimal amount of the information that I know that is in some quarters within the Director of National Intelligence Office and other places. So I think that we have to be patient. I think they're putting their toe in the water and see that if their toe gets bitten off, right? You know, how the sharks that are out there. And this brings up another question: is the Senate is considering a bill to sort of ramp up whistleblower protection. That needs to happen. It needs to include federal witness protection and marshals. The whistleblowers up here today will share you some amazing material and information, but keep in mind, it's a tiny fraction of what we have, all right? Because these folks were at facilities when they saw events happen. They were not running the programs. They were not in the command structure running the programs. We have those people, including CEOs of Fortune 50 companies and everything else, but they are afraid for their lives. And I'm not trying to be melodramatic. They are. And we have to protect them. So the government of the United States needs to step up to the plate and do the right thing and muscle up the security around these high-value whistleblowers, of which we have dozens. Now, there are others, what we call them hostile witnesses, that are also on the list that I've given to the White House and to certain members of Congress to be subpoenaed. So far, there has not been a hearing where they have activated the subpoena process. That needs to happen immediately now that this is coming out from the administration. And we have a very extensive list of names of people who need to be subpoenaed and put under oath. And if they lie, they go to prison, right? That's it. Yeah. So I just wanted to, with that breaking news today, wanted to sort of frame things for us. And then we're going to show a little video just as a trip down memory lane. If you guys can show that. You know, this is from the
technologies connected to UFO and extraterrestrial vehicles, if declassified and used for peaceful energy generation and propulsion, would solve the looming energy crisis definitively.
My name is John Callahan. I'm a retired FAA employee. I was the division manager for the Accidents Evaluation and Investigation Division in DC. About 2 years before I retired, I received a call from Alaska region where the region wanted to know what to tell the media. When I questioned, tell the media what, he says about the UFO. Now, I've told this story many times, and I get sometimes funny looks from people. I have with me the voice tapes of the controllers that were involved, the FAA original tapes. See, after we handed this stuff off to the president's staff, the FAA didn't know what to do with it. We don't separate UFOs from real traffic, so it's not our problem, okay? I have a copy of the original of the video that we took.
Good morning. My name is Dwayne Arneson. I served 26 years as a communication electronics officer in the U.S. Air Force, all over the world, including Vietnam. I was lucky to be selected to be commander of 3 different units in the Air Force. I held the top secret SCI TK clearance, and for those who know, it is slightly above top secret, is that a UFO was seen near the missile silos and the missiles were deactivated.
Good morning. My name is Carl Wolf, and I was a precision electronics photographic repairman with a top secret crypto clearance in the United States Air Force. I was stationed at Langley Air Force Base in Virginia. By the way, we've discovered a base on the backside of the moon. And then he proceeded to put photographs down in front of me, and clearly in these photographs were structures, mushroom-shaped buildings, spherical buildings, and towers.
My name is George Filer III. I'm a retired intelligence officer and flyer with almost 5,000 hours. Senior Master Sergeant in charge said that there had been UFOs in the pattern all night. They're on radar. The tower had seen them. They got in aircraft reports and so on. And that one had landed or crashed at Fort Dix. Fort Dix and McGuire are right together. And this is kind of like the Roswell of the East. But in any case, an alien had come off the craft and had been shot by a military policeman and apparently was wounded and was heading for McGuire.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Clifford Stone. I was a Sergeant First Class, United States Army. I had a secret clearance with nuclear surety. What I'm referring to here is that I was involved in situations where we actually did recoveries of crashed saucers, for lack of a better term, debris thereof. There were bodies that were involved with some of these crashes, also some were alive.
My name is Mark McCandlish, and for the last 21 years, I have worked as a conceptual artist for a variety of defense contractors. In 1988, in November, a college buddy of mine, an associate by the name of Brad Sorensen, informed me that he had personally witnessed 3 flying saucers at a very large hangar at Norton Air Force Base during the course of an air show that was held on Saturday, November 12, 1988. These discs were hovering off the floor without any visible means of support. They were referred to as alien reproduction vehicles, also nicknamed the flux liner because they used high voltage electricity.
And we have to prevent the weaponization of space because there is a lie being told to everyone that the weaponization of space is now first being based upon the evil empire, the Russians. There are many enemies, he said, against whom we're going to build this space-based weapon system, the first of whom was the Russians, which was existing at that time. Then there would be terrorists. Then there would be third world countries. Now we call them rogue nations or nations of concern. Then there would be asteroids. And then he would repeat to me over and over, and the last card, the last card, the last card would be the extraterrestrial threat. Well, at the time, I kind of laughed when he said asteroids, and when he said extraterrestrials, I knew I wasn't going to deal with that subject. And now we hear on the news just today, this week, that they've slid in another enemy. Only this time we're going to protect our satellites. In other words, we have to have some reason to spend these trillions to waste these dollars on a space-based weapon system, and they're all lies.
Okay, so 20 people stood up and did this 25 years ago. Most of them have passed away. There are a couple still living. Miss Rosen, who you just saw, was the spokesperson for Werner von Braun, who invented the first rocket for Germany in World War II, and then became foundational for our aerospace programs, as you know, under Operation Paperclip, where they were, key German genius level engineers and scientists were brought into the United States rather than being executed by us at the end of World War II. And Werner von Braun was one of them. So she became his confidant last 5 years of his life, and he warned that they would and have been hoaxing a threat that is alien. So next.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
Next. Just play these.
A shadowy government with its own Air Force, its own Navy, its own fundraising mechanism, and the ability to pursue its own ideas of the national interest, free from all checks and balances, and free from the law itself.
Think about what he said back in the 80s. Now, there was a young student who became a lawyer who worked with Senator Inouye, who later had a conversation. He says, yes, he had seen the 2001 National Press Club event. Every word of it was true. And the people running it is part of this shadow, illegal, unconstitutional government that he was referring to here. Very important for people to understand that. There are people who do know this, but there's great intimidation to keep their mouths shut. So Senator Inouye never went forward with his knowledge about the UFO issue. I think if he was alive today with what's happening out of the White House and Congress, he would. But he's no longer with us. So one thing I want to say this is foundational in this first few minutes. This is what nobody understands in the media and Congress, except for one or two people. We're talking about three different things going on. There are non-human extraterrestrial vehicles, bodies, civilizations. They are completely non-hostile. If they were hostile, we'd be gone when we detonated the first atomic bomb. Number two, the majority of all objects that are seen, photographed, chased by our military, our legal military, are man-made craft coming out of the Lockheed Skunk Works, Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, SAIC, Booz Allen Hamilton, and a number of other prime contractors, the list of which we have and have been given to law enforcement and to the executive branch in Congress. The other category, and that's completely confused, is what are called interdimensional intelligences. Now, let me unpack this for just a minute. I know because this has caused Congresswoman Luna and the Vice President to make some statements that are not true. But this gets into more than we can get into today, dealing with the physics of interstellar travel. But let me just say that if you go beyond the speed of light, you're not doing it in a linear fashion. You are creating an electromagnetic field where that craft and everyone in it drops out of linear space-time into another dimension, traverses through that dimension to another point, and it's called quantum entanglement, where, the spooky effect Einstein talked about, where the same particle be in two places at once. So this contangled universe where every point in space-time is connected to every other point in space-time. And that is how they're doing it. But when they're in transit, or if they are shifted, they could be in the atmosphere and shifted out of 3D, they're in another dimension, but they don't originate from that dimension. They're transiting it. Does this make sense? So I call them trans-dimensional interstellar civilizations. Now, because some of the phenomena dealing with ghosts, goblins, demons, angels are similar, theologists and religious people have conflated them, because phenomenologically, from an observation, empirical point of view, there is some similarity overlap, because the ET technologies cross into these other dimensions, operationally, scientifically. Is this clear? I'm trying to be really clear on this without getting into arcane physics. So I think this is why what's happened in the last few months is very disconcerting, because there are people who are working with the intelligence community, who are in the White House, the Pentagon, CIA, Congress, who are gaslighting and misleading our leaders. And I will be blunt about it. It cannot be allowed to continue. And those people need to be careful what they say, because this is all going to come out now. And if it comes out incorrectly, it'll be 1,000 times worse than COVID. If it comes out properly, it'll be a new civilization and one of the most unifying, beautiful experiences for all of humanity in recorded history. That is how stark the difference is. And this was in the briefing for the president right after he got elected. So we have to be very careful. Next. Now, if you really want to know what's going on this subject, this is where you need to go. The Disclosure Project Intelligence Archive. The URL is dpiarchive.com. Everything is in there. We spent about $500,000 digitizing everything I've collected for 35 years. And it's available to all of you for free. And so you can go through that and see. You'll see that this archive has significantly more information than anything that you will see anywhere else in the world, including the testimony of over 115 top secret whistleblowers. It's in there. Their full testimony, their credentials. Now, it's so much, it's almost what Dr. J. Allen Hynek of the Project Blue Book director said, it's an embarrassment of riches. We have so much, but I would recommend for the media and those of you interested in this matter to do a deep dive into this archive. Next. Now, this is what's released this morning. It's over the moon, and there's a triangular formation of 3 bluish lights. We have thousands of images way better than this, but this is the best of what was released today. Next. And in contrast, you'll see the one in the upper left. That's from one of our CE5 contact teams. We'll get into this, the psionic mind consciousness technology interface program that I started in 1990. That was a result of that one. You can see the middle one is a non-human intelligence ET from another star system that appeared at one of our events, and he was 2 people away from me. He popped in, and David Marconi, who wrote Enemy of the State, took this photo. I said, David, there's a guy standing right here. Boom, there it was. Transdimensionally came in. It's not from another dimension, it's physical. Their craft are physical, but when they're partially in this dimension, you could get it confused with an apparition or a ghost or some other phenomenon. You have to understand the physics of transdimensional interstellar travel. It's not your granddad's Oldsmobile. It just isn't. All right, and the bottom one is one that came out of Los Alamos from the time of the Roswell crash, and they had archives brought in, and this is a dissection of an ET on a slab from the 1920s. It's been dated to the 1920s. This is one of the pictures in the briefing document for the president. I don't often show it. It's a bit gruesome. There's a towel over the head. The archive is filled with this sort of information. And they came from a woman whose grandmother was at the Trinity program and made the atomic bomb program, and then got moved to Roswell because that was the only atomic bomb in the world when that craft crashed in the Roswell area in 1940s. So that when she died, her granddaughter was going through some old books in the attic, and this photo fell out. And apparently there was someone who gave her the photo from the photo lab there in Roswell in the 40s from a prior retrieval of an ET body in the 20s. So the secrecy on this goes back way more than 100 years. Top secret. Code named, code, level special access projects. Next. Here's one of the triangular craft over us. This is a Northrop Grumman or Raytheon device. It's a electrogravitic anti-gravity. And this is what members of Congress I have briefed have had people come in after me and said, do not look into that. It will cost you a lot. Don't look at this. But the biggest secret isn't that we're not alone in the universe. It's that we have programs that have already reverse engineered these technologies, but they have not been used in the national security interest. They have been used in criminal enterprises, including murder, kidnapping, child trafficking, drug running, human trafficking, and other issues. This we can prove. This information from a whole group of military folks who are working with me has been handed over to U.S. law enforcement, and as we speak right now, being investigated. All right. And this beautiful blue boomerang-shaped plasma craft is one that flew in over us at Joshua Tree National Park when I was with Demi Lovato. And we had set up a contact protocol out there. This is way more interesting than I think the best photo of what was released today, don't you? Anyway, next. So let's play this. Here's something that was released by Congressman Burleson. I had seen it before he released it. You'll see a sphere intercepted by a Hellfire missile. Now, this event was friendly fire. It was not an extraterrestrial device. That sphere was us. Now, the operators, here is a real problem. The first time I briefed the head of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, they were not read into this. And I said, your military aircraft and systems are often intercepting and having close calls, not with alien vehicles, but with clandestine, covertly made and funded black budget aircraft made by our aerospace giants, but off book, without the knowledge of Congress or the president. And therefore, very few people are read into. So you may have a top secret clearance. And in Washington, that and a couple bucks get you on the metro. But frankly, but it doesn't give you access to those special access projects that are code word compartmented dealing with this. So much of this is centered in corporate, but there are government people, agencies that do have this information, but they often are under orders not to share it with the elected leaders or the cabinet. So this is a dysfunction that has to get corrected, and I know it's being looked at. Next. In contradistinction, this is an actual extraterrestrial sphere, unlike the other one that was man-made. And this is in Buga, Colombia. You're going to hear a lot about this towards the end of our press conference. It's very important. In Buga, Colombia, this is what Jaime Mason now has possession of. This object came in and it landed. It got too close to a power line and shorted out, and it's in our possession, his possession. And we have been doing the studies on it, but that is an extraterrestrial technology. It's the first time in history that one has landed and been acquired and then not subsequently been grabbed by a SWAT team of some type. So this is a huge historic opportunity, and it is real. Even though most people on the internet can't believe it, it is real. Next. So here is something that I'm having to say, since people like Robert Bigelow of Bigelow Aerospace and others who were friends with the president have been gaslighting him about this issue. They are saying to do a soft or partial disclosure and cover up most of it. No, that can't happen. Now, there are OPSECs, operational security, dealing with this, right? That is legitimate. You don't want the propulsion systems that make something fly like that in the hands of terrorists. But you cannot deny their existence, because that leaves people open to the myth that all of the people who had contact and had experiences such as abductions and mutilations are encountering aliens when they're encountering our own covert programs. CIA, psychological warfare operations, we're going to prove this today. So once you use an advanced tech on innocent civilians here and around the world, you can't now claim to keep it secret. That has to be known. Now, you don't need the operating system, just like no one can go down to Ace Hardware and buy a nuclear bomb or a nuclear trigger, right? But you have to disclose they exist, because they've been used illegally and abusively against the population for decades, since the late 1950s. Next. Now, this is something I want to touch on just very carefully. I know the media here is going to go, oof. All I'm going to say is that one of the most senior people in national security for prior administration, and I met extensively for about 3 hours last year. He has the audio of the video of some files from Epstein Island of key people in our intelligence and national security system. When key, I mean very senior, that are compromised and are being actively blackmailed to slow down or distort disclosure. I'm going to say that. I'm going to let that sit. I will say to the Department of Justice, if you want to inquire into this and pursue it, because we're talking blackmailing officials at the highest level, that is interfering with the function of government. So that is what Epstein Island was. It was a honeypot set up by the intelligence community to entrap certain high-value targets and then control them through that process of blackmail. This happens all the time. Everyone knows J. Edgar Hoover had huge files on everyone, every mistress for every president. That's how he stayed in office. But this is serious. This is something that can really affect the truth of what gets to the president and Congress, or whether things are allowed to come out. So this is something that has to get nipped in the bud. I won't say who the officials are who are compromised, where I got the information, or who's doing the blackmailing, but I know the two senior former government officials doing the blackmailing. I know both of them. All right, next.
Are aliens real?
They're real, but I haven't seen them, and they're not being kept in what is it?
Area 51.
Area 51. There's no underground facility unless there's this enormous conspiracy, and they hid it from the president of the United States.
Okay, so you all know he had to walk that back, but what he said there was true. And it wasn't because, it was because we had put together, and I'd provided to John Podesta, who had put together the cabinet and had been Chief of Staff of Clinton, a huge file, a thing like this one. And so he knew it was real, but he never, through the chain of command, got access. So he wasn't lying. Now, Trump later castigated him on Air Force One. He was flying, and he said he shouldn't have said that, and that's top secret. And that prompted him to then issue this statement, which I won't read to you, you know it, where the president ordered the Secretary of War Hegseth to start releasing files and to do it as soon as possible. And of course, it says any and all information connected to these highly complex but extremely interesting and important matters. So what happened today was just, again, a trial balloon, first little bit. Next. And
You're going to release all the UFO files?
We're working on it.
We saw
And
aliens.
you know me.
We saw
You know me.
aliens.gov.
I don't think they're aliens. I think they're demons anyway, but that's a longer discussion.
All right. I just want to address this for just a moment. I had to go. Benny Johnson is a big podcaster and friends with the vice president. And when this happened, my phone blew up from all over the world. And of course, there are certain elements of like the Opus Dei group at the Catholic Church and other groups that have been pushing the aliens or demons agenda for 50 years. He is a Catholic. I respect people's faith, but you cannot confuse an extraterrestrial advanced civilization with a demon or an angel. It's very dangerous for somebody one heartbeat away from the Oval Office to speak this way, because this is how we end up in World War III, that's interplanetary, which is what the CIA has been wanting for decades. They keep the fires burning, they provide disinformation, they brainwash people with nonsense, and that statement has got to be retracted. Now, let me explain how this has evolved. I was on the show, the Benny Johnson show, a week later, and I laid this out. One of the things that the vice president said, and this is a common mistake. You see this little thing? What it is? Smartphone. So what? But if you took this back and showed Thomas Jefferson, my farm out in the country near his house, and you showed him this, it would be supernatural. So what the full clip was, he said, because these are behaving supernaturally, they're demons. But remember, everything we're using in this room right now would be supernatural to someone 500 years ago. An airplane would be impossible, defying gravity, right? If you were to show a video on a cell phone to people in Salem, Massachusetts, you'd be burned at the stake as a witch, okay? This is not okay to say something like that. This is a serious national security matter. It cannot devolve into the lunatic fringe of those kinds of theologies. Because what are we going to go gallop pell-mell back to the 7th century? We might as well be the Ayatollahs in Iran. This can't happen. I'm sorry to come on strong on this, but this is very dangerous stuff. Now, is there a theological and spiritual aspect of this? Yes, because the whole universe is a conscious quantum hologram, the whole creation. I believe in God. I believe in the prophets. I don't have a problem with that. But there are different phenomena. And one of the things I want to leave you with on this, because I could go on all day long, we have other things to do. When I was at the Vatican with Pope John Paul, senior theologian, Monsignor Balducci, I was in his apartments overlooking St. Peter's. And this issue came up then. This would have been in 1995, 6, 7. And he was himself a demonologist. His specialty were demons, believe it or not, at the Vatican. And he laughed when this came up. He said, look, neither angels nor demons need flying saucers. He put it so simply, and it's true. So people need to be careful. You're going to hear so many theories about what this is. And this interdimensional demon part of it is a deliberate gaslighting by senior people in these covert illegal programs to prey on the religious beliefs of certain people. And unfortunately, that's what's happened to the vice president and Tucker Carlson and a few other people. This needs to get corrected. Congressman Luna has also been deceived this way. I know the people who have targeted her with these wrong ideas. And a couple of them have been turned over to law enforcement for investigation for various crimes and felonies. But I think this is why we have to be careful what words we use matter right now as this comes in. Okay, next, the screen went blank. My screen's blank. So I just want to quick, this has been in the media in the last month a great deal. General McCaslin, there you go. He was a Wright-Patterson Air Force Base general that dealt with a lot of very dark projects related to this. He is missing. The guys I work with who are senior military operators from various walks of life, and I feel that, and I can't prove this, that the noose was getting close because the people I have been handing over information to in law enforcement and military and national security circles, we have been naming names that I'm not naming here today, but very explicit names up to and including people who have ordered what are called wet works, targeted assassinations of leakers and whistleblowers and things like that. And in the aerospace corporations, we know who some of those people are. Their names have been handed over and are being actively investigated for serious crimes, including murder, extrajudicial killings. So in this case, I think General McCaslin, in all likelihood, vanished himself as opposed to being taken. Now, there are scientists missing. Amy Estridge, for example, had worked on and developed an electrogravitic anti-gravity, if you will, type system. And if you look at our documentary, The Lost Century, that we released 3 years ago, we document, since for over 100 years, is what I call Lost Century, very brilliant scientists who have been killed or have been imprisoned or set up in scams to take out their inventions. This is why we're still using oil, gas, coal, nuclear, wind, solar, plug-in electric cars. If we had the technologies running a UFO, even the ones made by my uncle's old company, Northrop Grumman, you would never have, it would be an energy source coming from what's called the 0-point energy field around us. So these guys understand this, right? And so General McCaslin, though, was very much involved in some dark projects. We know he was the man who intercepted this rock star that I had briefed when he was a young kid named Tom DeLonge and handed him off to Luis Elizondo, where he was then chewed up and spindled and mutilated and spit out. And McCaslin has been an operative on this for a long time. So I think he may have just vanished himself. Okay, now I can't prove it, but that's our working theory as at this point. And where he is, nobody knows. Next. I just want to show you from the archive. If you go on the dpiarchive.com, you will see this map. These are the black sites that we've been able to document from whistleblowers, nearly 1,000 whistleblowers I've debriefed over the last 35 years. And the ones that are key, it will be in the next slide, And you'll see this summary. Now, this is what I've asked the administration and members of Congress to focus on, are these top tier ones, right? And the top tier ones, Dugway, Edwards, Wright Pat, you know, not Nellis Air Force Base per se, but the Northern Nevada test area. Area 51 is not particularly relevant, by the way. It's an old site, and the real actions moved up to Area 54, 53, some in 52. Those are grids on a map. Okay, so that's what you want to realize is that we update this map as we get new intelligence from whistleblowers and sources who are defecting, and this is your guide. Now the corporations involved, you can see those. I'm not going to read them all. We don't have time, but this is in the briefing document. And by the way, there is this document, the redacted version of it you can get from us. You can just order it. And it has everything but the sensitive, some of the tactical information, and then some of the sensitive names that have to be redacted for the public, okay, or out. But everything else is in there. This is in there. So I would suggest if you really want to know where these assets are and where the underground bases are, you go through that. Now, we have been able to map down to the entry points of many of these places, both at the Dugway Proving Grounds in Utah, Edwards Complex, the Lockheed Skunk Works, Northrop Grumman Test Range, the facilities out in Tonopah and going up to Groom Lake and Pahoo Mesa. We know where those places are. We know where the assets are, and most of them are underground, and they're very large underground facilities. I'm told the one that's in the Utah complex associated with Dugway is about 1,300 square miles under the earth. That big, huge, massive. And it's been built by contractors like Bechtel Corporation using a nuclear-powered tunneling device. And we have the schematic for that device that's in our archive that was developed in the 1960s. So when they started building these vast underground complexes, that's what they used. It was a nuclear-powered tunneling device. Next. This I just went through. That's the cover page. Next. So here are the actions that we've been recommending. Criminal investigation focused on illegal covert government and corporate programs related to UFOs. That is happening. This is what was in his recommended actions provided to him in November, the president. Both executive and congressional actions are needed to authorize a law enforcement search and seizure of these illegal operations and their assets. This is also begun. These assets include recovered extraterrestrial vehicles, man-made UFOs, and related technologies, extraterrestrial biological entities, even living ETs that are captive and still living. We have people who know where those are, and man-made alien-appearing bodies and robots that are used in false flag operations, such as abductions. Almost all the mythology about the UFO subject, it's a psychological warfare operation that was run mainly out of the PSYOPs division of the CIA. A key objective would be immediate cessation of the targeting and capture of extraterrestrial vehicles and their occupants, which is now ongoing. Now, I understand there is an attempt to stand down those actions, because if they don't get stood down, it's very dangerous. It's been going on since the 40s with directional energy weapons. 3, both executive orders and legislation should support the above recommendations and include a provision for immunity for those currently or previously in these illegal programs who are willing to cooperate fully. What am I saying here? We have many high-value assets that have been involved in criminal activities, and they need a letter of non-prosecution from the Department of Justice, an Attorney General, to protect them from prosecution so they can cooperate, and they want to cooperate. So this is how you make a deal, okay? The art of the deal. Here's the cosmic deal, all right, Washington. We need to extend letters of immunity to some of these people. Next. A diplomatic initiative should be immediately started to make peaceful contact with any and all ET civilizations visiting the Earth. They should be viewed as a permanent national and international diplomatic mission, the goal of which is to full rapprochement with ET civilizations. This has never happened. It started to happen in the early 50s with Eisenhower. It got shut down. And we need to start that back up. Now, our CE5, or Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind Contact Initiative, has been doing that formally for 36 years. But it's an ad hoc public diplomatic group. It's like citizens diplomacy. You get the app, CE5 Contact, on your app stores. But this needs to go official now. So we're not alone in the universe. It's being acknowledged. Now we need to get serious about not just the United States, but other countries creating a safe space and a protocol for contacting these civilizations rather than just tracking them and blowing them out of the skies, which is what's been going on since the 40s. An executive order is needed to immediately cease the targeting and downing of NHI craft and any other acts of hostility towards them. An international agreement removing and banning all weapons from space and the use of advanced reverse engineered technologies as weapons should be negotiated with enforcement capabilities in place globally. Why do I say this? Because OCONUS, outside continental United States, is where a great many of our assets are that are being run by a sort of a global covert group, and you have to stand them down globally. It's not enough to stand them down just in the continental United States, right? So the organization running these secret programs, think of it as a global hybrid corporate governmental entity that operates with alacrity regardless of your geopolitical borders between Canada, US, Russia, China, whatever. And this is why these objects are seen in Russia and China that are man-made ones. And it is a big problem. So when I've met with people who are tactical operators at a very high level, the big discussion is how do you get that under control? And get it under control so that we can have a peaceful world, but also make peaceful outreach to these visitors who mean us no harm. They're here to help and understand us and contain us if we go too far crazy, right? And I'm talking about using technologies that we have that are way beyond the thermonuclear weapon bubble that we have and have been using against them. So the aggressors here, ironically, are the humans. Forget all the Hollywood movies and the UFO mythologies. If they were aggressive, we'd be gone. Okay, next. So now I'd like to introduce Roderick Castle. He's a U.S. Marine Corps veteran who served from 1994 to 1999. He served with the Flying Nightmares, an AV-88 Harrier squadron stationed out of MCS Yuma, Arizona. His account is very important. Thank you, Roderick.
Hello. My name is Roderick John Castle III, and I'm prepared to repeat this testimony before Congress or any other legal body. From 1994 to 1999, I served as an aviation ordnance marine with VMA 513, the Flying Nightmares, an AVAB Harrier squadron out of Yuma, Arizona. I was an E5 sergeant, leading teams of Marines responsible for the weapons systems and crash response. I deployed aboard the U.S. Bella Wood and the USS Essex. After active duty, I continued serving in the New York Army National Guard and the Air National Guard. And in the aftermath of September 11th, I participated in air defense operations around New York City. In 1997, during an exercise in the California desert near 29 Palms Marine Corps Air Station, I encountered something outside standard military practices and technology. 6 of our VMA 513 Harrier jets were attached to a special purpose Marine Air Ground Task Force, participating in what was called the Hunter Warrior Advanced Warfighting Experiment. On March 10th or 11th, my team were sent out by the airfield tower to investigate unidentified aerial activity, possibly flares. Myself and 4 Marines headed to the identified spot near Emerson Dry Lake Bed. As we came over a hill approximately 10 miles outside of the main base, we witnessed a large, flat, black mass hovering above the desert floor. It was silent, triangular, approximately 300 feet in length, and it hung in the air roughly 150 to 200 feet above. With no visible propulsion and no heat signature consistent with known aircraft. There were spherical yellow-white lights embedded in each point of the triangle. The lights were not bright, and in the center of the triangle is possibly concave. This is all I was able to observe in those few seconds. On the ground, approximately 200 feet down the hill, were 3 black F-150, 350 type unmarked vehicles and 20 to 30 men armed with rifles and sidearms, dressed in black tactical gear, no insignia, no identifiers. We skidded our Humvee and crash response trailer to a stop and were quickly overtaken by 5 of the men who ran up toward us in an arrowhead formation. Aviation Ordnance Marines do not carry our M16s on us. Our weapons were in the back on a rack. So we were quickly overtaken. We were ordered out of the vehicle with rifles pointed at our heads, pushed against the truck in order to look at the ground. These men had American accents. I knew that at any moment we could be shot in the head and erased in the desert. Approximately 2 to 3 minutes later, in my peripheral vision, I perceived the triangle craft arc upward and then accelerate to the northwest at an incredible speed. The men ran back to their vehicles and the entire team drove away quickly in the same general direction as the triangle. The Humvee would not restart for 5 minutes. Some battery power, but the engine would not turn over. Upon returning to the base, we were relieved of duty before the shift was over in order to return to our group sleeping area. We were met there by our acting staff sergeant and a warrant officer. The intention was clear. They were there to check on us and to follow orders given from above. We were asked about the flares, and we reported that we saw nothing. Myself and my fellow Marines did not discuss the experience. I only received a silent, "What the F," from my corporal. The sense was we had seen something we should not have seen, that we could have and could still be killed or reprimanded because of it. The following day, I, of course, experienced psychological distress, confusion, anxiety. Then myself and the 4 other Marines received an unscheduled anthrax vaccine, which I'm still trying to get answers about. And then came the interrogation. Approximately a week later, back at Marine Corps Air Station Yuma, I was brought in by NCIS, Naval Crimes Investigative Service, under the pretense of unrelated allegations, theft of computers, charges that ultimately led nowhere. But the intent was clear. We are keeping an eye on you. Following that deployment, myself and the 4 other Marines were assigned to different units. I have attempted to reach out to them, and they either I cannot locate them or they want nothing to do with disclosure, and I respect that. In the years that followed, I dealt with symptoms that many veterans in this space will recognize: PTSD, neurological irregularities, memory disruption. And like many others, I tried to make sense of it in a world that wasn't ready to hear it. And I want to end by saying that, again, I am prepared to give this testimony to Congress. I did file a report with the FBI, even though it's 29 years later. It happened on U.S. soil, and I have still not received a response. Thank you. Thank you.
So the next will be Green Beret, who was operational. Next slide, please. And he will share with you several events that happened during his career. And I very much appreciate Randy coming here. He is a Green Beret who held a TSSCI clearance. He was stationed for a period in Crane, Indiana, as a weapons expert between 2013 and 2015. And he has some very important information to share from that. Thank you.
My name is Randy Anderson, former U.S. Army Green Beret, weapons sergeant. I also spent 20 years as a firefighter for the city of Las Vegas. My entire career is built on discipline and service to my community, my country. And what I'm going to share with you is something I experienced during my military training in 2014. I'm not here to tell you what I saw exactly what it was, but I'm just going to report as what I seen that day. I was at Naval Surface Warfare Crane, Indiana, which is a weapons high-level weapons training facility for the Navy. We were there doing some routine training, but advanced weapons training that day or that week. A few days into the training, myself and another one of my classmates were pulled aside after class and were told we're going to see some additional stuff. Nothing at first seemed unusual about this. We were taken to another building, brought to an elevator that went down significantly further than I've experienced going down an elevator before underground. So that was notable. Once we got out, went through some security checkpoints that were, I would say, equivalent to going through a skiff. Dr. Greer's talked about that before. A skiff is just like a higher level of security. So we went through something equivalent to that. We were sanitized, take all of our electronics and watches and devices off and make sure that you're sanitized. And that's where it felt like something different was going on. After that, we walked down a hallway and were guided by these two gentlemen to this area that had a sign that I thought, and this has been talked about on the internet a lot, but the sign said off-world technology, which was very strange to me as well. And so I have no claim about why that sign was there. It's just, it stood out. It's something strange. We entered a room. In the first room was a metallic sphere that I saw, about the basketball-sized sphere. And now there's all this talk about spheres all everywhere, and it looked about that size of the typical sphere that we've been seeing around. It was hovering over a podium, a couple feet off the top of the podium, and it was just floating there. And it was very strange to see. And it was metallic. It was a strange metal. It looked just unnatural to me. And the other object, it's been nicknamed the Gauntlet, but I don't necessarily think that's what it was. It came out that way when I first told the story, and it's been, people kind of ran with that, but I don't know that that's what it was. It looked like you would pick it up by putting your arm in it. So that's why I got that kind of name. And it had some type of crystal, looked like a crystal display screen on top of it. And while I was looking at it, I saw inky black symbols start to appear above it. And I feel like I was the only one in the room that had seen that at the time. And I didn't mention it. I was new on the team at the time, and I wasn't going to take any chance of getting pulled aside for something else. I didn't want to take any chance of getting off my team, really. So I just didn't mention that I saw that day. And we got to see this stuff. They talked a little bit about, that they recovered it from an old crash, and they talked about it pretty nonchalantly, like it was a Tuesday afternoon. And then we were brought out of there and had a quick debrief, and that was that. We were told not to talk about it, and we didn't. So I never was told why we were brought down there. I don't know what the purpose was, and to this day, I've never had answers to that. You want to talk about the test site stuff? Since then, I've worked out at the test site. I worked all over that facility. Yeah, in Nevada, where Area 51 is located. I worked all over that facility doing red team operations, which is basically for tier 1 units. We provide an enemy fight for them. There's a couple things that have happened out there. We saw a couple times, we saw orbs that were just floating around, and we were told not to talk about. And again, this isn't part of my military career, so this was different. We're just told not to talk about them, or we'd have to do extra paperwork. So all the guys kind of just hushed up about it. One green orb and one orange orb was what I saw. A triangle-shaped craft was another one I told Dr. Greer about. That just kind of, yeah. It was a little less equilateral than that. It was a little bit like more sharp triangle, but it looked a lot like that. And we saw that as going into like the nautical twilight hours. And then and when I was deployed, at one point we saw some advanced drone technology, which is a little bit scary for me to talk about. But I would say, based on my experience and what I've seen, that a lot of the stuff that people mix up for UFOs is probably a lot of technology that we have, advanced technology we have as well. That's just my experience. So that's basically everything.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. Yeah, this off-world technology office is a real place that he went, and it is extraterrestrial artifacts there in Indiana. So that's now on the map, and it's been handed over to investigators in the government. These triangles that you're seeing like this, some are more isosceles, some are equilateral. This one is probably a Northrop Grumman. There are others that are, the prime contractor would be Raytheon. They're anti-gravity, quote unquote, electrogravitic. They have no payload of fuel, no oil, gas, jet fuel, rockets, means of conventional propulsion or energy. And they do not have, most of the time, nuclear reactors on them. So they're pulling energy out of what's been called the zero-point energy field. And they have an anti-gravity or mass cancellation lifter system. And those were developed from reverse engineering PT craft back around 1954 is when we had the breakthrough on that. 1 year before I was born. I'll be 71 next month. So been a while since we've had this tech, although most presidents and members of Congress have no idea we do. So thank you very much for sharing that. Next, I'm just going to show a clip here of my friend Carol Rosin. She was, as I mentioned before, Werner von Braun's spokesperson. And she just wants to do a little update message to all of her. She's couldn't travel right now, but she's working still with us, and she's still doing great work trying to create peace in space. That's her whole mission that Werner von Braun gave to her.
Hello, my name is Carol Rosin, and I look forward to presenting to the Congress everything that I'm going to say today at the 25th anniversary of the Disclosure Project, and what I said in the first one 25 years ago, where I presented Werner von Braun's warning that there was going to be a faked alien threat scenario produced, and we're seeing that happen now. This is the follow-up, and it's a very simple, quick one. We have one opportunity right now to transform this whole war industry and the actual wars. We can have headlines, war is over. How? By calling on President Trump to reboot the Golden Dome into the Golden Peace Dome. We have a chance now to communicate, of course, with extraterrestrial off-planet culture beings. We're doing it. You're getting evidence of the proof of the technology and information that's being made available to us. Even President Trump is disclosing files on the UFOs. The problem with that is, at the moment, it's being presented, all of it, in the context of people saying that there's an alien threat. People are believing that fiction is fact, that lies are truth. We have a chance now to correct all of that, because in the Golden Dome are weapons at this point. It's modeled after the Iron Dome, which doesn't totally work anyway. And we have a chance now to build the Peace Through Strength Dome that President Trump knows about, and put it in the right context. The new context is that we're not alone, that they come here in peace. They've proven it. They've visited many people, including myself. We now know that they come in peace, that they're coming as explorers, and we have to get in our heads, in our consciousness, in the new frequency of consciousness that many people have studied, that we can live in peace, all of us, like they do in the cosmos. And that's what we're going to do. We have to make the decision to jump into the higher frequency of consciousness that we know we have. I've learned it from working with people like Werner von Braun, who was a visionary. We have President Trump, who's a builder. He's an architect. He's a developer. We have a chance now. All we have to do is focus with intention on Trump collecting the world leaders to sign the treaty that is mentioned also in the executive order that we hope he will present to prevent the placement of weapons in outer space that Russia and China called for many years ago, and that over 40 countries actually approved until the US under a different administration pulled out. No, now we're going to be able to do this because it's in Trump's executive order, along with the support that we're calling for and so calling him to support and do. We're expressing our support to him. We have the technology to solve that. We're going to have free energy. We're going to have all the technology making us much smarter, more spiritually oriented and aware, and we're going to have peace, world peace, from peace in space that we need to have in order to have peace on Earth. Our president is in position. He is the one. He is the disclosure president, and he's doing it. Now we just have to pray, focus, and imagine and see ourselves living around the world in world peace with all that goes with it. May we have peace in space to have peace on Earth. Thank you.
She's been fighting that fight since Werner von Braun asked her to in 1974, when he knew what the plan was to present a threat from outer space that was fake, and what assets had already been deployed to prove it. And that's when they started back in the late 50s and 60s using these ARVs, alien reproduction vehicles, or man-made UFOs, to abduct people and do cattle mutilations and all the mythology that you hear about in the UFO subculture. Those were all orchestrated by humans for their psychological warfare value. Next. So oh, someone took all the papers that were up here. Well, we have Mike Batista. He's a former Green Beret also, who has been involved with some what are called psionic programs. And those programs deal with making contact with non-human intelligence to bring them within a certain range for operational purposes in classified areas and programs. So with no further ado, I'd like to thank Mr. Batista and introduce him to you.
Dr. Greer. All right. Good afternoon. My name is Mike Batista, and I am willing to testify under oath before Congress for what I'm about to say. I'm here to speak about a series of experiences that began during my final year of active duty service as a U.S. Army Special Forces soldier. That background shaped the way I observe, assess information, and approach serious matters. I was visited by and interacted with multiple types of UAP and NHI. These were not isolated sightings. They were sustained, direct, and responsive interactions. Approximately 8 months after leaving the Army, I had become someone of interest while trying to figure out why this was happening to me. And eventually I was approached, evaluated, tested, and eventually recruited by a military contractor to work as a psionic asset. A psionic asset is an individual who utilizes consciousness to interact with non-human intelligence for operational purposes, including initiating contact, influencing the engagement, and facilitating proximity. This was operational contact. The concept was that consciousness could serve as an interface, and along with focused intention and specific states of awareness, you could use it to initiate or intensify contact with NHI. That basically means using consciousness to create the conditions for the interaction. The objective was to use psionic assets to attract UAP for technical exploitation, target acquisition, and downing of non-human craft, to include the recovery and reverse engineering of that technology. This was not the outcome of every contact event. In many cases, they were just observed using advanced imagery, like infrared and thermal systems. I can't discuss any methods, locations, or specific operations, but I can say this. This was not just about observing the phenomenon, it was about interacting with it in a controlled way. And after that period, I did eventually go public and work alongside an aerospace company focused on ethical and peaceful contact. At the end of the day, the interaction between consciousness and the phenomenon is real and it needs to be taken seriously. In the future, the subject will not be defined by sightings alone, by our ability to understand it and interact with it. Thanks for your time and hearing my testimony.
And there's a video he took. It's one of them on the ground.
Started playing. So this is an orb, and this was within 50 feet of my position. My team and I acquired this. This was in Florida this year, a few months ago, and you can see. Let me play it again.
Yeah, you can play it.
Yeah, you can see it. There's some sort of sphere or bubble around this, and it's acting in an extremely anomalous way. And we've been seeing this phenomenon for quite some time, but this was the first time we were able to get as close as we did to this. There was a limit of advance with this phenomenon. It did not want us to get closer than we did. It kept moving away from us, so we took that as a reason to not go forward. But there you go. Yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you. Yeah. Next. One thing I want to comment on this, because this is a quick trip through some complex ideas. All this is in the archive. When he refers to psionic, what you need to understand in just simple layperson's term, imagine this instead of being electromagnetic frequency, radio frequencies, being able to interface directly with conscious thought in an intended way. Very advanced. Think of it as conscious AI. That is what extraterrestrial civilizations use. You cannot communicate across the vastness of space at the speed of light because it would take 1 million years to get a signal to a star system 1 million years away. I've known this since I was a child when I had contact directly with these civilizations and learned what that technology was. So it has been formalized, unfortunately, into a weapon system. Why General Stubblebine, the head of Army intelligence back in early 90s, 1992, offered me $2 billion as a young doctor to give up my medical career and what I'm doing with this project to become an asset for him, because our program had broken the Rosetta Stone code of contact that involves the use of consciousness, directed thought, and technology to make contact. But we do it in a peaceful way. Unfortunately, there are systems operating out at the Edwards Complex, the Nevada Test Range, Provo, Utah, and another sites on the coast of Florida, where those same systems are turned into a way to attach to and guide over extraterrestrial vehicle and then target and strike it and knock it down with an electromagnetic pulse weapon, the very existence of which is in violation of the International Non-Proliferation Treaty. Because it is a component of the EMP that comes out from a nuclear device. But in this case, it's just the signal itself, and those are used to strike these objects, and it disables them because they are 100% electronic and transdimensional. But just keep in mind that any technology, even consciousness-assisted technologies, can be used for good or for bad. And in this case, what we started in 1990 as a peaceful citizens ambassador outreach to non-human life forms from other star systems got twisted into a weapon system. And I know many people who have been in those programs. I've known about this since the early 90s. Now it's beginning to come out. There was an operator out at the Edwards Complex named Jake Barber and some of his team members that came out last year who knew about those operations, who were on the retrieval teams. This is real. It sounds like science fiction. And I understand that to most people, it's a bridge too far, but you're not dealing with 20th century and 21st century technology. You're dealing with civilizations that are thousands to millions of years more advanced, and they have technologies that would all look magical to us. But that part of it, a big part of it, is the thought consciousness interface with matter and space-time. And that is what they're using for communication, but it also is used to sense them by people who are skilled, like Batista and others. And I'm glad to hear he's involved with a program now that's peaceful, but over the last 50 years, they've not been so peaceful. And they've been used to basically attach to the guidance systems, lure them over and strike them and down them. So imagine if you were, it's like when the Iranians got that really space age looking drone that they hacked into the system, landed it and reverse engineered it back years ago. You can look this case up. Imagine doing that with thought, consciousness, actuation, and interface. Same thing. High tech, very high tech. All the AI people, listen carefully. This is what's really coming. Conscious AI. All right. Anyway, we don't have time to go into all that, but the next whistleblower is become a very good friend of mine, Michael Herrera. He's a U.S. Marine Corps veteran. He served from June 2007 to October 2011 and did a tour primarily in Southeast Asia. Thank you, Michael.
All right, good afternoon. I just want to start out this statement saying that I'm willing to testify under oath with penalty of perjury in a public hearing from Congress, in front of Congress. I've asked for this repeatedly and still waiting. So I am a former United States infantryman with 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines. It was the most decorated infantry battalion in the Marine Corps. And at that point, we essentially, the job as infantry, you can imagine, it's humanitarian assistance, but it's also direct action through combat. So I wanted to do an exciting job, and that was exciting. So the context with this is we were called out to Southeast Asia, which is where our theater of operations were. That is the western part of Sumatra. There was a 7.6 magnitude earthquake that has struck, and that was around September 30th of 2009. We then were the only ship, which was the USS Denver at that time, that routed from the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit, which was attached to the 7th Naval Fleet. Then we were the only ship that was cast from there to go to the western part of Sumatra. Now, upon arriving there, my team, which was randomized, it wasn't like a set team because we were doing different things in the ship, and we were essentially put into sticks. Those sticks were then boarded onto CH-53 Super Stallions, which is a transport helicopter. They're pretty big. They're one of my favorite transport helicopters that the Marine Corps has. And that's what we inserted into. Our job at that time was to provide security for the landing zones or hasty landing zones, which you'll see as HLZs or LZs. And then we were also to facilitate and help with the aid that was being transferred to these landing sites. And we took these helicopters because some of the roads were washed out and we couldn't reach them outside of, obviously, getting helicopter inserted in was suitable. So for us, we're not going to stick out in the open. We're going to position ourselves tactically to where, one, we have the best observation possible, which is elevation. So we then decided to secure a ridgeline that was off to the side, about 150 meters or so, probably less than that. And upon looking over that ridgeline towards the north, we see the top of this thing, and it was rotating in a clockwise position. It was transforming colors between light matte gray and a dark matte black. Now, when you have something that's through vegetation like that, it's very abstract. It's going to get your attention. We thought it could have been a building. It could have been something like that. At that point, I had a camera that was on me that I was taking video of some of the helicopter insertions, or at least when we were getting off the ship. And I actually had some photos I snagged of this from the top view of where we were positioned on that ridgeline. Because we then saw that, the leader of our team decided that we had to go down and investigate. And so we proceeded. As soon as we got to this clearing, which is what this thing was basically occupying, and looking at the craft, you could see that it was octagonal shape. It had sharp edges, quarters. It had rivets. It had seams. You could tell it was pieced together and it was man-made. You could tell it was something that was built from one of these aerospace companies. Now, accompanying this craft, when we were verging onto the position, we were then intercepted by a team of 8 operators that were wearing black camouflage utilities that had no insignia, that had no marking, no rankings. Some of them, most of them were wearing ball caps, is what I can recall. They then searched us. They then seized our weapons. They cleared them. They took our magazines out of our pouches, dumped them, kicked them off. They kept a couple guys at standoff distance while we were searched. They took photos of our IDs, and they started to basically threaten us to say, hey, it's easy to get lost out here. You can get killed out here. You can lose you out here, things like that. And as that's going on, we were seeing these trucks come up, which look like that. They could either be Ford F-350s or they could be Toyota Tundras, up armored, and they were pulling these trailers. Now, these trailers were like a miniature version of a shipping container that had mini split HVAC systems on the top of that. Now, when I first saw this, I had speculated, even when I first came forward in 2023, I had speculated it was a drug running operation because of the HVAC systems. So these trucks were loading these containers, which were about 4 of them, onto the platform that's underneath this craft. Now, I only remember seeing 4 trucks. And as soon as we're going through being searched, the trucks then disappear. I don't think they may have went onto the backside. And that platform started to raise up. It then met with the main part of the craft right there. And as soon as it came together, it started, obviously the rotation didn't change. There was an audible hum that you could only hear, which was like a guitar amp or an electrical transformer kind of noise. Not as identical, but if you guys can understand how they would sound, this is what it exactly sounded like. And as it met with that craft, it decided to raise up, and each of the corners of this craft started to basically show a color: red, yellow, green, and blue are the only lights I can remember seeing. As soon as it cleared the tree line, it shot over to the left of us, which was towards the ocean. And that thing, obviously, it did not destroy the trees, did not produce any kind of rotor wash, did not break the sound barrier. But this thing went from thousands of miles an hour, possibly hundreds of thousands of miles an hour, instantaneously like that, like a spark off a grinding wheel. And it shot over to the left. Upon that craft departing, they had told us to turn around and traverse back up the hill. So we did that, as they're still threatening us, wanting to shoot us, things like that. And as soon as we get back to the LZ, which we trucked up the hill, went down back to where we were at, we were then accompanied by a gunnery sergeant who I'd never seen before, who had a radio, and he called basically for us to get out of there. We were adjusting our gear because when they put our weapons back, they slung them on our back, basically buttstock here, and it'd be very hard to get them off of you. So we had to help each other before we decided to go back onto the ship. And we were briefed by a rear admiral subsequently after that. Now, my camera, they did not find in my dump pouch. Now, when we actually concluded this operation and proceeded to go on Liberty in Subic Bay in the Philippines, the first night on Liberty, I come back to the ship and I find my camera that I actually had stowed in my locker, which was secured, was on my rack. The memory card and the battery that was in it was missing. So I had then retrieved another battery out of my locker, put it in, and it wouldn't work. So that was what happened to that. Now, when we ended up going back to Camp Hansen in Okinawa, I was also met with a Air Force Lieutenant Colonel, at least that's who he presented himself as with his uniform, but he had no name tag on. I remember seeing silver jump wings and seeing, obviously, a slew of ribbons. But this is the gentleman that pulled us each aside separately, threatened us with execution because of treason, because of disclosing this information. The NDA that he forced us to sign, I remember having to put my social security number. It had TSSCI on it, and it had Indonesia as the only things I could recall. I signed it. Now, I want to make something very clear. These NDAs are not legal by any means. I have not had any kind of repercussions legally. This is the reason why I decided to testify to Arrow. This is the reason why I decided to testify to Senate Select Committee of Intelligence as well as Senate Armed Services. And I've yet to have any legal ramifications from doing so, which is why this is public. So if there's anybody out there who is worried about that, rest assured, as long as it's something that falls under this umbrella of unconstitutional and illegal, you're going to be fine. We can help you with that. So at the time, as I came forward in 2023, I was approached by a couple of senior operators that were out west of the United States. And they had provided a context to me with evidence, as well as showing me a few things going out there. But this was not for drugs. These were psionic assets that they were recruiting from Indonesia. Now, they'll say it's a psionic recruitment operation, but it's still human trafficking. Okay, they had humans that were in these containers. And the reason why they were doing this is because there is something about third world countries that have people that are more enlightened and more consciously adept, which is what they want. And what I mean by they are these illegal, unconstitutional legacy programs. Now, I also want to make another distinction between this, that a lot of the people in these programs are not evil people. They have been hoodwinked for decades until they find out that they're a part of something that could be monstrous and potentially criminal. In a lot of cases, it is. So since having that happen and providing that to me, and then to go back and tell people like him, as well as some people in the government that I'm working with, as well as federal law enforcement. So this is an ongoing problem. I'm not going to get into how I know this, but just understand it as an ongoing problem. The other ongoing problem too is obviously Arrow. When they had put out my testimony through volume 1 of the Arrow report that they released to Congress and the public, they completely misconstrued my testimony. They said that I saw an extraterrestrial spacecraft and I was intercepted by a team of U.S. special operators. First of all, I didn't know who these guys were. I didn't know what their backgrounds were until these operators that participated in similar operations, not exactly like this, but have knowledge of it, and then include me into what they really, how they plucked them, what their testing was, how they get through this. So obviously that information has been handed over to federal law enforcement. If you guys can put the next slide, please. So this is an aftermath of obviously a downing of a non-human intelligent vehicle or ET vehicle that they were using some of these psionic operators, like you just heard from, out in some remote parts of certain areas of the United States, where they then are targeting collectively, and they are downing these extraterrestrial spacecraft with these EMP weapon systems, which you can see right here. If anybody's curious about what brand it is, it's called Epirus, and it's a Leonidas. That is what the systems are using. They use them for drone warfare, for deterrence. Well, for dual purpose. So the people that produce those more than likely have no idea that these are also being utilized in that faction of taking down ET vehicles and using psionic assets to lure them in and to do that. So this is the reason why we are bringing this up. This is the reason why I've testified, because after getting this information, providing evidence, seeing these things firsthand to an extent, is the reason why I'm trying to get this solved as well. Because I could live with the fact that if they were actually drugs in those containers, that would have been fine. But then hearing that it's humans and it's a psionic recruitment operation, human trafficking, I feel like my duty is to help these people that are in these third world countries that are being smuggled here. And I'm going to continue to do so, and I'm going to assist it until we solve this problem. Thank you for your time, ladies and gentlemen.
So I know this is some disturbing information. I call it disclosure PTSD that evolves over time. Certainly me doing this for 36 years. But one thing I want to point out here is that these cases have been turned over to federal law enforcement, to people at the White House, and to certain members of Congress that I have relationships with, so that they understand the extent of the problem, what the technologies are. But we've also given the exact GPS locations for the underground facilities where both human and non-human people are being held, and in many cases tortured. They are euphemistically called the extraterrestrial biological entities. They're refugees, but they're actually been captive when they've downed their craft. And this has been turned over. It's a criminal investigation. I can't say a lot about the who, the what, the where, and what entity, but it is ongoing and it is making great progress. Next. Now I want to take a really quick trip here, connecting a few dots, because as this disclosure happens, and it's going to be building and building over the next months, there'll be a tremendous amount of confusion, not only about demons, but about what most people attribute to UFOs. But that's a general term. As I mentioned earlier, there are man-made operations and there are non-human or extraterrestrial ones. So here's a quote from the renowned aerospace and astrophysicist Jacques Vallée. Dr. Vallée back in the 80s acquired a CIA document from 1985 outlining the use of these advanced man-made UFOs with creatures that look alien, that are man-made, to abduct people in Brazil and Argentina for their, and I quote, psychological warfare experiments. That's true. Here he is commenting on it.
Or could it be manipulated purposely by people who have the technology to simulate UFO sightings? And people say, well, of course not.
Next. And here, going all the way back to 1953, CIA Director Walter Smith And it's a memo describing the psychological warfare value of the UFO subject. So this was 1 year before we mastered gravity control. I have people who've been in the vault to see the documentation. 1954 October is when we mastered gravity control, gravity field propulsion. And they began to think, how can we divert people away from the extraterrestrial phenomenon, but create a false narrative that they're a threat? They began in the late 50s and early 60s on a program of staging human abductions, staging mutilations. So have people had contact with ETs? Yes. Have people been abducted by ETs? No. The abductions are being done by a covert special operations program, and it began in the 60s. And this is something we have asked that the president and the intelligence community stand down by all means necessary, because it's abusing many innocent civilians. I myself, in July 1994, right after I briefed the Crown Prince of Liechtenstein, Hans Adam von Liechtenstein, I was attempted to be abducted out of my hotel room. So I know this is real, and the technologies that are used, we know exactly what they are. We don't have time to unpack that. Tomorrow we will at the 4-hour event. But I think you need to understand this is under criminal investigation also. Next. And here is a colonel who's known as Dr. Death. He has a PhD in death and decay thanatology, Colonel John Alexander.
Another one we put on a UFO and was able to report like he had been abducted. In this case where he had not been, but UFO sightings were, popular at the time, particularly abduction scenarios. So that was one where, again, changing history could cause a new scenario and be able to describe the situation just as if it were real.
And again, next, Air Force Special Investigations
that deal with ET simulations. What I'm referring to here, there have been some contact events. The one you're referring to, sources, was actually not ET.
We did do that, yes. OSI did that. There was a special group out of the 7602nd Air Intel Wing at Fort Belvoir that came out and did that. They had these people that had maybe some sort of defects, anatomical defects that were brought in to fool people into thinking they're aliens. Yeah. I can't give you any specifics because it's still, the program is still classified, and they probably still doing it.
And indeed they are. So this is pulling the curtain back on the Wizard of Oz, pulling all the levers, scaring the hell out of Dorothy and the Scarecrow, which would be us and the media and all that. So you need to understand that it's so complex that, when you're dealing with this brand new to the subject, like the president, members of Congress, and people who come and go in the Department of Defense, Department of War, the DNI office, it's a big lift to get them up to speed. But we have to do it quickly now that this is going to come out officially. So next.
I think the most important information will be the biologics that are not human that have been discovered. And like even some of the briefings that aren't classified just need to be out in the public. I mean, I had someone come and brief me who was in a military uniform, worked for the United States Army, that was briefing me on the locations of hybrid breeding programs where captured aliens were breeding with humans to create some hybrid race that could engage in intergalactic communication. An actual uniformed member of the United States Army briefed me on that.
Now, what Congressman Gates is referring to is something I learned about in the early 90s, and that there are things called program life forms, or PLFs, that are man-made aliens from genetic material from retrieved actual extraterrestrials that are then combined with some human DNA, and they come up with these sort of, I call it a Frankenstein alien. So many of the grays, the reptiles, these things you hear about, those are real, but they're man-made. And we know the facilities where they're making them, how they're making them. I know physicists and people who worked on them. It sounds like science fiction. It's gruesome, frankly. but it's real. And I think this is, people need to understand that. Next.
But I'm wondering, kind of how you react to that, because you are connected, you're on the UFO subcommittee. I mean, I'm just wondering what you make of that. Have you heard anything like that?
Well, I'm still a member of Congress, so I can't really comment too much on what Matt said. But I will say this.
Wait, seriously? Are you being serious, or is that
I'm being
tongue-in-cheek?
100% serious. Okay. I've been 100% serious. I've been briefed by just about every alphabet agency there is. And I'll just tell you this, if they would release the things that I've seen, you would stay up, you'd be up at night worrying about or thinking about this stuff. We just need to disclose it all. I'm sick of it. Well, I was briefed. I'll just tell you this. I was briefed last week on an issue, or excuse me, 2 weeks ago. And it would have set the earth off. This country would have come unglued, I think, if they would have heard all that I heard. The president, release it all. And the problem is the people that are around the president don't know and the president doesn't know the questions to ask. A few of us are going to have to get with the president and tell him what he needs to ask and where he needs to look.
Right. So that's what the Disclosure Project's main mission is to get that intel to these people who I know, get them to network it with the president and other people, and find people who are not corrupt to take the investigation further. So this Disclosure Project officially is just beginning, although we, technically did it 25 years ago. Next. Everyone knows about the Tic Tac. Let's show a video. You all heard this. It went global years ago. And you'll see this object. And of course, I've spoken to the people who were the military who chased this and imaged it. At the time, of course, everyone said this was an alien craft, and it was released. I will tell you, absolutely, this is a Lockheed reverse engineered electrogravitic system. It's been around since at least the 1960s. It is not alien. Here is a sighting, a representation, 1967 in Wickham, Pennsylvania, up here. You're talking almost 60 years ago. Here we have a whistleblower from the Azore Islands who does not want to come forward during the first Gulf War, who saw one of these being offloaded off of Hercules, the transport plane. And then you'll see next is one that was in I cannot disclose the location, but in the Middle East not that long ago in 2015, that was going to be deployed in that theater of operations. Now, keep in mind that these are often used not in support of our troops, but they are usually used to get reconnaissance and sometimes feedback to the enemy in a treasonous way, or will do reconnaissance to find in a war-torn area or a natural disaster area where there are humans that can be captured and be used in these experimental programs in the United States in these black projects. It's horrific, but by no means is this something that needs to be kept secret. This absolutely is not an alien device. This is a man-made one. Next. Now we're going to talk about something that's really fun. We have breaking news on that. We have our wonderful friend, Jaime Masson, who will step up in a moment. I just want to give my introductory information here real quickly. The Boogosphere, screen went blank. Y'all see anything? Oh, there it is. All right, well, go ahead. This is technical difficulty. Oh, now I have it. Okay. So this object, back in March of last year, was flying around Buga, Colombia, South America. It is an extraterrestrial object. We've done the analysis on it. It is electrogravitic anti-gravity. It is not a hoax. There are now 10 different videos from 10 different spheres flying in this region in South America. And I will say that recently a new one has landed and has been retrieved. This one that I have handled and seen and been to Mexico City now 3 times since June. I took Congressman Burleson down with me in June of last year. Has interesting inscriptions which have been analyzed to be a type of Proto-Sanskrit, a very unusual type of circuit pattern on the top of it. And if you look at these holes around the equator, the center, it's one seamless sphere, but inside these holes is a type of resin that has fiber optics microscopically in them. And we took some of this resin and tested it next, and you will see that the resin done at the University of Georgia, the top carbon-14 dating facility, is 12,560 years old. So this sphere is 12,560 years old. It's the end of the last ice age when a comet or an asteroid hit. It's the flood stories of ancient times. So either a very advanced extraterrestrial civilization assisted at that time or was already here, or people working with those civilizations made this. It is an extraterrestrial technology. Next, you'll see the metallurgy we did. The whole report is 110 pages. You can see the list of elements. In there, interestingly, are a number of elements that were not even discovered until the late 1800s or early 20th century that have a high electromagnetic conducting purpose today, but in unusual quantities. The actual alloy itself, that is the skin of this 1 foot diameter sphere, is in fact no known alloy that currently exists in any aerospace or industrial application. It matches none of them in its complete composition analysis. Next. So here's it's interesting, X-rays and CAT scans. So I'm going to show you these lit up areas. There are fiber optics that light up within this. Fiber optics were modern ones we use as a doctor, and laryngoscopes and surgery and other purposes for communications. Those were reverse engineered from an ET craft recovered in the 40s. That's where you got your best integrated circuits, and fiber optics and also night vision cell technologies were from reverse engineering extraterrestrial vehicles. Next. Here is a very unusual structure from the CAT scan. They used a tin filter to get some of the colorization and elements. Interestingly, this structure no longer exists in it. This was taken not long after it landed. After it got too close to a power line, it shorted out and landed. That's how we have it. And a man picked it up. But what's fascinating about this is that when I saw it, I immediately thought this is some type of superconducting low temperature plasma. And that can recruit energy from what's called the quantum vacuum or 0-point field, provide the energy to put it in rotation and spin and have it levitate. Now, when this landed, when the farm or the guy in Buga, he was out in the countryside, saw it go down after it got near the power lines, it weighed about 2 kilos. Now it weighs 10. So there was a gain in mass of 4 or 5-fold. Why? So the nature of the physics, we don't have time to go into and put you all to sleep anyway, is that when you create a certain voltage in rotation, you can get what's called a mass cancellation effect. So in terms of, and mass is different from weight. Weight is what something is in one gravitational field of the Earth. Mass is the periodic table weight that you see, the mass of the elements. But if it gets massless, if it goes to 0 mass, it vanishes and teleports or goes out of this dimension and can, through quantum entanglement, appear in here and then here. But we understand, we meaning in the classified programs, that my uncle's old company was Northrop Grumman and Lockheed Skunk Works, that's understood. But this, interestingly, this structure, next slide, we did a micro CT scan, he did, and here's a Nikon camera. Look at the detail. These are amazing for industrial and aerospace purposes. And so a really advanced one that was in Pueblo at the university last month, Jaime was able to arrange. He's heroically done this. And I want to show you the image. Here's the interior of it now. Where's that structure? It was like dissipating a cloud. I think it was an energy form that dissipated. And here's a video of that micro CT scan as it's going through the surface. And you're going to see it as it passes through. And it's a big void. Yeah. It's like a quantum vacuum void. There are some filaments and material in there. My theory is that whatever containment field and structure in there that was an electromagnetic and low temperature plasma and superconducting field dissipated in the ensuing year between the original CAT scan and this micro CT CAT scan. And that at some point, if we could get in there, but it'd have to be done under very careful conditions, we could find more. This is the new one that just landed. This has just been retrieved. This is the second one that's in possession. It does not have the Proto-Sanskrit on it, but apparently it is inside. There is. Someone opened it up. I'm not going to get into it. I just learned of this morning at the same time the president's materials dropped. I have not been able to do a scientific review, but there is a second one now in our possession and in Mr. Mosson's possession. So I just want a quick trip through that. This is the first time that I know in human history, in modern times, that something of non-human origin, that's a technological device. Imagine what would happen if we could reverse engineer this, right, properly. Don't need Lockheed and Northrop, just leapfrog them. But boy, you're talking millions of dollars in security around that thing. That would be phenomenal. Way beyond my ability as a retired doctor to do. So I'd like to introduce Jaime Masson now to present the rest of it.
Thank you. It's been an adventure. As you know, I am a journalist for the last 55 years. I was head of 60 Minutes in Mexico. I am an investigative reporter. I have now a television channel, a mainstream television channel, 3.3 nationally in Mexico, and we are able to broadcast every news around this phenomenon every day. Then you want to watch it, it's in Spanish, but we have all the information there all the time. Okay, let's go. As Dr. Greer said, on March the 2nd, 2025, this sphere was moving very close to the first witness, Maria, who recorded the ball, the sphere, very near to her house. As you can see, the sphere was having problems because it's very, very possible that this sphere hit a very high voltage line and lost the energy there, or something happened to it. Then the second video, Jose Arias Restrepo, was able to record the sphere on the other side of the mountain for 8 minutes until it landed just in front of him. This is the first time something like this had happened. This is Jose Arias. He took the sphere. The first thing he said is that weighted, as Dr. Greer said, 2 kilos. A few days later, the sphere was weighing 6 kilos, then 9 kilos, and finally 10 kilos. That was the first thing that became very, very strange to us. This is where Jose Arias put the sphere for an hour because he took it, he was working, he put it there, and nobody expected this, but a few days later it was completely dry, as you saw. He took the sphere to his house, and because of that, he had to go to the hospital. There were some damage to him. You can see here the weight, 62 kilos. Okay, on June the 7th, William Zuniga was able to record this very near, also at the valley, at the same valley. And the sphere probably is one of the best videos ever recorded. El Valle del Cauca, it's been registering many sightings, as Dr. Green said, at least 10 sightings over the last year. Some of it very near to population. You can see here that it has the same kind of dots in the middle of the sphere. It means it's the same. A few months later, just a few of the videos, because there are so many and there is no time to present them. But in this occasion, a parapente was flying, also in the Cauca Valley, and they were very afraid because the sphere was very flying was flying very close to them. Then this is January 29th this year. Two brothers, a sister and a brother, were working in the top of the hill when this sphere got very near to them, probably 9 feet away from them. When she pointed to the sphere went away. And her brother saw it, and then they started running and recording. She's recording the sphere. Chupi, the man Jeffer, was trying to get close to the sphere. But they were able to have very good images. As you can see, this sphere is smart. This is something we don't have. Until the sphere disappear. But you see, it's enough evidence to understand that these spheres are flying all around Colombia and in many other places of the world. These are some of the analyses that were done by the university in Mexico, and they were the first to found the fiber optics. You can see them. They are all around the sphere, everywhere. These are in the little holes. This inside the little holes, the black holes around the equator. This is the so-called boogosphere, and it has a message. I cannot go around it because it takes a long time, but it's a genesis. It's very similar to the beginning of our religion. Everything was created by God and was given to us to take care of it. And it's up to us to continue protecting the earth or not. This is on March 15. We had an event in Mexico City for 8,000 people. Dr. Greer was there. And this is probably the largest crowd for a UFO event ever. And we stayed there for 4 hours. Dr. Greer can tell you, and nobody left. Nobody left. We presented all the witnesses, all the evidence we had. We presented the message, and was a great event. And I thank you very much. And I'm willing to give this testimony under oath to the USA Congress, to the American Congress, because I am just telling you everything that is true. Thank you.
Thank you. So one of the conclusions I have come to with these boogosphere activations, of which there have been a number, is that there are remote sensing devices that are 12,500 years old that are picking up some sort of either cosmic energy or electromagnetic or magnetic field disturbance around the Earth. It's a bit ominous because when these were active last, there was a massive Earth change event that occurred. The so-called flood stories of ancient texts and in the Bible. But these are not being activated just willy-nilly. All of a sudden, they are being activated here and other places. You have to be careful. Some of them that you will see in videos are actually the man-made spheres. So remember, everything that's extraterrestrial, they have captured and over the last 80 years and have reverse engineered and made a facsimile or a copy that looks extraterrestrial but is man-made. And this is where you need real subject experts looking at every bit of evidence that comes out of the Trump administration and the Secretary of War and the US government, because this is a highly specialized ability to distinguish between man-made and non-human technologies, images, and it's very few people have that expertise, and this is what we're going to have to watch for very carefully. The other thing about the boogosphere that I think is so important is that the way it is, these tests that we have done prove that there's no bolts, screws, seams, all the traditional manufacturing things you see in a man-made device does not exist. So it is almost certainly of non-human origin. It's very ancient. And now, to my astonishment this morning, I learned that a second one has been retrieved. Yeah. Thank you. Next. I just want to, I don't have time to go through this. This is in our archive and it's in the briefing document you can order online at drstephengreer.com. This has a sample speech for world leaders when they fully disclose this. And the wording of it in the instructions are to make it a positive and hopeful event for humanity, to admit to the mistakes of the past, but to go forward, to release the energy technologies to give us a new civilization without pollution, poverty, or problems that we see today and endless oil wars in the Middle East. And also to make peaceful contact with these civilizations, because at a certain time, humanity will mature to be a peaceful global civilization and will go out amongst the stars, but not alone. And they're here and they're waiting for us with open arms if we can go there peacefully. We are not allowed to go out there as we currently are as a warfaring backward civilization. We have to become peaceful. Next. And this is one of the things that I saw years ago, an event where the CE5 contact protocols, the psionic, would be an event where there would be world leaders and an ET craft would land in what I saw, it looked like White Sands area. And this was in a remote view, because that's what I do. I mean, I was a meditation teacher and a remote viewer before I was a medical doctor in my misspent youth. But had fun doing that. But I clearly saw this happening, and that there was an elder ET that would come out of this and it would be seen by the whole world. So at some point in the future, I think we will have an open landing and peaceful contact event. And I think that's what we need to encourage our leaders, not just here, but around the world, to pivot towards, instead of just fear mongering this with nonsense. All right, next, I want to just open this up now. Getting late. We're running about 12 minutes late, mostly my fault. And I'd like to open it up to any media that are here for some questions here at the end. Anyone got a question? Yeah. Have my people give them for the folks who are.
Hi, my name is Surreal. I'm from Dallas, Texas.
Real quick question. We're short in time.
Yes. I wanted to know that it says that, I'm sorry. What do you think the validity of claims that at least one of the species of these ET are not actually NHI or from another world, but they're actually highly evolved humans from the future?
Well, we do know that at the Rendlesham Forest Bentwaters case that happened in the early 80s in the United Kingdom, where that pyramid-shaped craft landed, and that I was helped get people in the Ministry of Defense to release those documents. That, in fact, was descendants of humans from 500,000 years in the future that came back to warn against our endless wars and the nuclear assets that were there. It was an illegal nuclear base that could have triggered World War III. So that has happened. It's a little bit out there, talking about time and space being the plasticity of time and space, but that's not most of them. But yes, that's certainly possible, because when you get into the understanding of trans-dimensional physics and quantum entanglement, space and time become flexible. And it's not something that happens often. I don't think it's the predominant part of it, but it is a component. Yeah. Another question. Oh, we have only one runner. Okay, that's all right.
Hi, I'm Joe. I'm a mathematician from New York. My question is, does there exist interstellar malevolent terrestrial technology? And if so, does that open the possibility for non-terrestrial malevolent technology?
Yes. Okay, so if you can imagine, when Ben Rich, who's the famed president of the Lockheed Skunk Works, the week he died, a friend of mine, James Goodall, is a renowned aerospace historian, spoke to him, and he said, anything you can imagine that you have seen in Star Trek or anything you can imagine happening, we have already done at the Lockheed Skunk Works, and it's not at Area 51. It's out in the desert, and I know where it is. I know where I have videos and photographs of the underground opening at the Lockheed Skunk Works and where they test the man-made vehicles. But there's astonishingly advanced technologies. The problem is those are not under the supervision and control of the president or the Congress, and they have been used illegally to target extraterrestrials and things in space, and that could lead to a catastrophe for the entire planet. I have said multiple times over the last 30 years, the lack of supervision and control of the entity keeping this secret is an existential threat to all life on Earth. I am not overstating it. As an emergency doctor, I just tell you the damn truth. That is the truth. So this has got to get reined in because, yes, at a certain point, there is a universal right to self-defense. And unfortunately, the folks who are running these programs are considering themselves masters of the universe. And I asked one of them once, because I have had many meetings. I've debriefed well over 1,000 people over the years on this issue at a very high level, where they have admitted that, yes, we are trying to provoke a response that's violent so that we can unite the world around a totalitarian military scheme that would scare the bejeebies out of everyone, so everybody would give up their freedoms and their security so that we could, get into some kind of conflict with non-human entities. This is the plan that was hatched in the 50s. It's why Eisenhower lost control of the programs, why he treasonous group that broke away back in 1955, 56, after the president had a meeting with some ETs out in the high desert near where Edwards Air Force Base is, and it's gone sideways and gotten worse and worse and worse with each decade. So, yeah, this is a very big cancer that's metastatically spread all over the world in a very compartmented operations, but those programs absolutely need to get stood down fast. So at some point, these civilizations are in no way, there's at least 5, 6 dozen different species that have been documented. Forget the thing, there's the grays and the 4 that some member of Congress was told recently by a clown at the Department of Defense. There are dozens and dozens, if not hundreds. None of them are hostile. They're very concerned about us because we've gone from, in 100 years, from, kind of like horse and buggies to thermonuclear weapons and reverse engineered their objects that we now have deployed against them. Right? This is a very serious problem for Mr. Rubio, the Secretary of State, who probably is the most knowledgeable person in the administration because he was co-chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee when I was handing off terabytes of data to his people there in the SCIF for Senate Intelligence. So I think that this is something that is urgent. I'm hoping, I'm not privy to all the things going on in government. I'm a private citizen. Never been in the government, never gotten an Indian head nickel from the government, don't want it, or a corporation. But I do think it's time for us as citizens to demand that these criminal enterprises be stood down, that they be vigorously stopped, that it be non-kinetic, if possible, non-violent, but by all means necessary, the aggressive use of those advanced technologies which do exist, those need to be stood down and stood down hard as soon as possible. I think we have time for maybe one more question, and they want us out of here at 5. Yes, ma'am. I don't have any information on the Miami Mall incident. I understand that that is not what it appears. I've never been able to get a credible read on it, and I deal with things that I try to prove scientifically or through multiple corroborating witness flow. Now, remember, what you're seeing here are the tip of a huge iceberg of whistleblowers, and we have literally hundreds of them. But most of them do not have the courage of these men to come forward. And I just want, in conclusion, to thank all of you and the media, but also to thank these guys, Batista, Anderson, Castle. All right. All right. Thank you all very much. God bless, and keep the truth coming out. Appreciate your help.